Hey friends, I'm Laura, but most of my friends just call me Sassy, short for the Sassy Dietitian, of course, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new around here, stay a while and I'll be sure to bring you some edutainment. You know, education plus entertainment. Get it? Got it. Today we're going to talk about how much you actually need to eat. I get this question all the time. People are confused of how much food should I actually be consuming, what should I be consuming, etc. We're going to break it down and we're going to talk all about the quantitative side of things as well as the qualitative side of things. Yes, that's right. We're not just going to talk about numbers, even though most people like to. I like to talk about how we can also figure out how much food we need without ever thinking about a number. It's time to get nerdy. If you can, please make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. And if you care to, share this with someone who you think will find it helpful. Maybe a friend, a family member, your gym, a trainer, a macro coach, someone who can actually use this maybe for their practice or for their own benefit. So let's dive in. So today we're going to talk about the basics, learning how much you actually need to eat in a day. Going back to stage one, I get this question all the time. People are asking, how much food do I actually need to eat in a day? It's a great question, right? We all have to feed ourselves. We're all hungry. We're all busy. And it's something that we weren't really taught. We don't get taught this in school, unless, of course, you go to school for nutrition. And so I want to talk about both the quantitative side of things, how much you actually need to be eating from a numbers perspective, but then also talking about a qualitative perspective. How do you know how much you should actually eat without ever tracking macros or getting into the nitty-gritty of numbers? Because for a lot of people, that's just not the right way to go. So that's right. We're going to be talking about both the quantitative and the qualitative side today, and recognize that there's no one size fits all approach, and how much you need to eat really depends on the individual. It also will depend what stage you are in your life, what season you are in your life. So things may change. You may get watch this video today and say, yes, I know exactly how much I need based on what she's talking about. You might then, a year down the road, have something else happen. Maybe you have a baby. Maybe you decide to run an Ironman. Maybe you get a new job where you end up sitting more. And so your calories may change over time. The total amount of food you may need to eat over time will change, and that's okay too. Our bodies are ever changing. They go through a lot of different seasons in life. We go through a lot of different processes, both mentally, emotionally, and physically. And so we need to treat our body in the same respect that we treat our cars and our dogs and our kids, right? We take them and we maybe not daily, but we often check in on them. And so we need to do the same with ourselves and how much we're eating. So no, this is not a substitute for you going to work with an actual trained professional like a registered dietitian. However, it's meant to just give you some insight into how we even figure out how much we should be eating in a day. And that way you have the tools to be successful, to understand that you do need to feed yourself, probably more than you think you do. And no, this is not going to be a 1,200 calorie diet video. And if you don't know anything about that, I will link below in the notes my article that I once wrote about death to the 1,200 calorie mentality, because I am completely and utterly over it. Okay, so the basics. My first day of Nutrition 101, we were taught this equation. Are you ready? Get a pen. Energy in should equal energy out for maintenance. Okay, you didn't really need a pen for that. But the thing is that we have been taught over and over and over again that energy in should equal energy out if we want maintenance. If we want a deficit or we want to lose weight, then energy in must be less than energy out. If we want to gain or be in a surplus, energy out must be less than energy in. So if you take a big bird's eye view of this, it's correct, right? We can look at it from a very simplistic view and we can say, yes, common sense tells us that energy in should equal energy out. And while that's not entirely wrong, it's also not entirely right. So we're gonna break it down so you can understand why it might be right and why it might not be right for you and what we can do about it. So when we're talking energy in, we're talking about the inputs. What are you putting into your body, right? Food. At the end of the day, we're just taking in food, perhaps supplements, perhaps powders. I like to call it powders, pills, and potions when I'm talking to my clients. But anything that you are consuming through your mouth, anything that comes in the body in the form of fuel. Calories, macros, whatever you want to call them, we're just talking about actual inputs into the body. Then we have our outputs. These are things that how we burn fuel or we burn calories. I hate using the term burn calories. I think people think that, oh, if I just run around the block one more time, I will burn more calories. And that's just not a great way, not a great relationship with food. But if we are looking objectively, our outputs are in four different categories. They are our BMR. Our BMR is our basal metabolic rate. This is what our body needs just to be. This is what you need if you decide that you're going to literally lay in bed all day. The alarm clock goes off and you decide you're going to stay in bed. My guess is you'll have to get up to use the bathroom, but I personally have to get up for snacks first, but who's asking anyway? So our BMR is something that we really can't do a whole heck of a lot to change. One of the biggest things you can do to change it is to increase muscle mass. The more lean muscle mass you have, the higher your BMR. However, it's also influenced by things like genetics, age, sex, and body composition. And so if there's not a lot we can do, because I'm never going to be 6 feet tall. I know my personality is that. I know. But I'm only 5'4". That's something I cannot change. Yes, I can change it with heels, but we cannot change our BMR based on my height. So it's something that is always pretty much set. Mine is around 1,400 to 1,500 calories, depending on what either measurement or calculator that you're using. Then we have the thermic effect of food. No. There are not fat burning foods. And if someone comes at me with it, don't try me. Got it? So the thermic effect of food, this is truly just when you are consuming food, your body has to burn calories in order to digest it and absorb it. This is just part of the process. And so it's probably about 5% or so of your total daily expenditure. So it's really not that big of a deal, but it is something to keep in mind. So it is beyond your BMR, you also, if you are eating, you are burning calories in order to digest that food. So then you have your third area, and this is your energy expenditure from exercise. So if you are physically active, any exercise that you are intentionally doing to raise your heart rate and increase the intensity. So something like a HIIT workout, CrossFit, weightlifting, swimming, running, hiking, you name it, anything that you're probably going to sweat and breathe a little bit heavy. That is something that you can affect maybe 10% of your caloric or your energy expenditure. Then the final part that most of us forget is your NEAT, your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. These are the calories that are burned through activity. Me moving my hands right now because I don't know how to talk without using my hands. Just use some NEAT. Going for a walk with your dog, doing some yoga or stretching, gardening, all those daily life activities that we do, that we move our body. So not sitting at your desk listening to this. So maybe get up, go for a walk, and keep on listening. So that is how we figure out what it is that we are burning throughout the day. So our energy in is the food that we're consuming or the calories that we're consuming, and then out is anything on top of our BMR, because our BMR is always going to hold true and hold steady. It will change throughout our life as we age. It will decrease. If we lose muscle mass, it will decrease. If we gain muscle mass, it may increase. And so there are ways that we can tailor this up and down, but it will not change significantly. So in order to change the output or change the energy expenditure, we must look at the other three areas, mostly the exercise expenditure and the NEAT, or the non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So you say, how do I figure out my BMR? That's a great question. Thanks for asking. So your BMR, once again, is your basal metabolic rate. This is just what your body is using to help your organs function, to help your eyes blink, to help your lungs breathe. And so to figure this out, you can use platforms like an InBody or a Bod Pod or any of those bigger body composition programs or facilities. But if you don't have access to that, that's totally fine. You can actually figure this out through two of the major ways that we learned in school, or the Mifflin-St. Yor equation or the Harris-Benedict equation. And both of these are taking your height, your weight, and your age into consideration, and then figuring out what your BMR should be based on that. If you have no idea what this means, you can Google it. Obviously, I'll include it in the notes below. But you can also go online. There's a bunch of different calculators that help you figure this out. I'll also include the two that I like best. There's a lot of sketchy ones out there, and if they tell you 1,200 calories for your total TDEE or your total daily energy expenditure, then run for the hills and maybe come back to me, because I don't believe in that mentality. So that's how you figure out your BMR. Now, in order to figure out the other areas, the TEF, exercise energy expenditure, and the NEAT, can we just guess? Yeah, we're going to have to guess, because as much as there are good activity trackers out there, I have found, and I'm currently doing an experiment, I've got a Garmin on this hand and a Whoop on this hand. They are not sponsoring me, by the way. And I like to see the difference, and I can tell you that they are both significantly different, and also both are significantly under my current caloric intake. I do not trust activity trackers at this time, because I do not think that they are fully accurate based on your activity, because they cannot completely understand you as a person and understand 100% what you're doing for every activity, and take into consideration a lot of other factors that go in to the energy that you are expending. So that was a long drawn out way to say I prefer to use what we call an activity level. An activity level is something that you multiply your BMR by in order to estimate the amount of calories you need in a day. Notice that I said the word estimate, okay? So none of this is written in stone. None of this is perfect. If I were to do the calculation and another dietitian would do the same calculation, we might recommend slightly different ranges for you. And that's another good point. We should be looking at ranges, not static numbers, not just I can only eat 1,800 calories today and that is it. Because you are a fluid person. Sometimes you are more hungry, sometimes you're more active, sometimes you're less hungry, sometimes you're less active. You get the point. So we can look at the activity level and say, okay, am I sedentary? Do I do minimal activity and sit at a desk all day? Maybe that's you. We now multiply your BMR by 1.2. However, am I someone who works out 2 or more times per day and or has a very labor-intensive job? Maybe I'm multiplying by 1.9. And we tend to look through that range. So 1.2 to 1.9, and we have all levels in between, which I will show you right here. So you can pick where you think you might fall. Try to be as accurate as possible. If you're not sure, pick a range. So for me, I would say I'm moderately to very active. I'm anywhere from 1.55 to 1.725. I don't normally do 2 a day. So I probably won't be up to the 1.725, but there are days where I'm taking my dog for a walk and doing a workout, and I'm just a very busybody. I tend to go walk up and down the stairs because I go down, I forget something, and I come back up. It's just how I've always been. I forget what I'm doing halfway through I'm doing it, and so I must go back down and do it. So I would put myself probably around 1.65 if I'm being honest. So I take my BMR, I multiply it by my activity level, and now I have a range or so of calories that I need within a day. Now, this is not the end all be all. There are a lot of things that affect your total energy input and output. And so while a lot of people will tell you as long as you're in a deficit, you will lose weight, that's not always the case. If you have something going on with your metabolism, the way that you actually use and you absorb and utilize food, then we need to look into that. If there's something going on with your gut health that may affect the way that you're able to utilize and absorb food. And then finally, your hormones. Healthy hormones will allow you to gain, lose, and maintain weight fluidly. However, if your hormones are a little wonky, something going on with your cortisol, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, etc., we may actually find issues with the amount of food that you're taking in and the amount of food you're burning because of hormonal imbalances. And so I'm not going to get into that today, but know that a calorie deficit can help you lose weight, but it's not the end all be all. You are a lot more complicated than that. And so we have to make sure that all is good with your metabolism, your gut health, as well as your hormonal health. So Anywho, that's just another side tangent. If you're really not sure how to figure out how much food to eat in a day or how many calories to eat in a day, please contact a professional, a trained professional, someone who actually specializes in this. If you're looking for someone, obviously I recommend a registered dietitian, but anyone who has trained experience in metabolism as well as nutrition sciences, that's what you're looking for. Someone who truly understands the metabolism and how it works, and also understands nutrition and what you should be eating and consuming in order to be the healthiest that you can possibly be. So that being said, what do we do with these numbers? Now that we know that, we calculate something relatively simple, what do we do with this? I'm so glad that you asked. I thought you weren't gonna ask. Anywho, so what do we do with these numbers? I like to look at it as a quantitative and a qualitative approach. I personally don't think we need to be in one camp or the other. A lot of people think when we're talking about food intake, we either need to be macro tracking or we need to be intuitively eating. Now, what is macro tracking? Macro tracking is counting the entire calories that you're consuming by way of tracking your macronutrients. Your macronutrients are your carbohydrates, your proteins, and your fats. If you don't know what those are, great. I'll create a new video for that. Don't worry about them. But for now, just know that your macros make up your calories. They're basically, if you're looking at a Lego building, the building is made up of Lego blocks, and the Legos are your macronutrients. Your house are your calories. Pretty good analogy, right? So anyway, we're talking about quantity and quality as it pertains to how much food we need in a day. For quantity, how can we figure out how much we're actually consuming? The easiest way is to track it and weigh and measure. It's not something that I recommend for most people. It can become super restrictive and obsessive, and it's just not the way that we can sustainably fuel our body. For those who it might be beneficial for, are in my mind, mostly athletes, those who are looking to perform at a very high elite level, and they want to make sure that they're eating enough food, because most athletes tend to undereat, and it's not their fault. It's just because they tend to be so busy and so tired that they forget how much fuel they actually need to eat in order to fuel their activity. So tracking and weighing and measuring is certainly an option. Now, weighing and measuring is like the most accurate, but also the most obsessive. So I don't think it's worth being accurate just to become obsessive over something, because food should be fun. Food should be enjoyable. So we could take it back a notch and just tracking your food intake. You can do it through a source like Chronometer. It's an app you can use on your phone or your computer. I personally use Practice Better with my clients, but you have to use that obviously with a trained professional because it is an electronic health record system. There's also MyFitnessPal, which I'm not a huge fan of, but it does do the trick, and a few other online trackers. You can also just track by good old pen and paper. Anywho, I had a pen there, so I figured I would do that. So you can track, and for a lot of people, this helps them realize what they're eating. So a lot of times we can hit the right calorie number, but we may not be able to hit the right amount of protein or carbs or fat. So that's a few ways to do it. You could also look at portion size. So understanding how much protein you need in a meal. So do you need about a deck of cards, which is 4 ounces, or do you need about 8 ounces, which is 2 decks of cards? It's really knowing what those portion sizes are, or when you're making a recipe, looking at the serving size and saying, okay, this is the lasagna and it calls for 8 servings. I'm normally eating 2. Maybe I only need 1. Maybe I need 1.5, and understanding what the calories are within the serving and what you actually need. Now, on the flip side, there's also the qualitative approach as far as it comes to, am I eating enough? And so for one thing, we can look at the hunger fullness scale, and we can start training ourselves to understand where I am on that scale. Am I truly hungry? Is it time to eat? Or am I feeding an emotion and I'm not actually hungry? And start learning, am I feeding my actual hunger, or am I feeding an emotion? And while feeding an emotion isn't always the worst thing in the world, we really want to make sure that not every eating opportunity is emotional. It is truly helping you to fuel your hunger. Other ways we can do it is we can journal our feelings, not just the number. So what I do with a lot of clients is I have them journal how they feel before and after a meal. So that way you're not just documenting a number, you're also documenting, how do I actually feel? Was I hungry? How do I feel after? Do I feel full? Do I feel stuffed? Do I feel satisfied? Do I feel energetic? Do I feel sluggish? What is it that I'm feeling around my food, so I can start connecting the dots? Every time I eat an entire pizza pie, I feel excited going in, but I feel stuffed and bloated going out. What happens if I were to eat 2 slices of pizza? Maybe I'm excited going in, which is what we want, and then I also feel satiated and full and satisfied at the end. So looking at the before and after and what's going on there. We can also monitor cravings. So if you're constantly realizing that you're craving chocolate, maybe it's because you've been restricting chocolate. And so we can look at that and say, maybe I just need to incorporate a square of chocolate every day, because that will satiate that craving without causing any need to binge or restrict it. And then finally, we can also measure an energy and performance. How do you feel before and after a workout? Before a workout, you should be motivated and excited. After a workout, you should feel a little bit tired, but also energized, right? You just got that huge boost of endorphins. And so you should feel energized. If you feel completely drained during or after a workout, chances are you're not eating enough. So these qualitative things can be just as helpful, if not more helpful and sustainable, than the quantitative side of things. And so when people say that, you're either macro tracking or you're intuitive eating, you can do both. You can track your food intake, and then you can also track how you're feeling and just start finding what's right for you. All of these are just tools that you can add to your toolbox to understand, am I eating enough food? So how to know how much you're eating, how much you should eat in a day. You can totally try to figure out your BMR plus your activity level, and then try out a few of these techniques. Track your food intake. Maybe you just do it one day. And I like to do this too with clients, is track 1 to 2 days just to see where you are. So if your BMR is 2,000 calories and you're consistently on those 2 days eating 1,600 calories, you are in a deficit. And if you're not looking to lose weight, which most of us should not be trying to lose weight more than 4 weeks at a go, then perhaps we need to up that to the 2,000, actually give ourselves fuel and energy to feel good in our day. Wouldn't it feel great to actually be energized? I tell all my clients, if you want to be as energetic as me, you're gonna have to eat like me, and I eat a good amount. So once again, track for 1 or 2 days. And then you could also then track your hunger fullness for 1 or 2 days. See what feels best and see what gets you the results you want. At the end of the day, do you feel energetic? Do you feel like you are not hungry all the time, but you're also not full all the time? You just have this nice, even energy level. So I know that it's hard, and it doesn't seem like I'm giving you like you must do X, Y, and Z in order to see success, but your health is a long-term journey, and we have to look at what's most sustainable. And what's most sustainable is eating to your hunger and fullness, while also keeping some mindfulness about portion control and macros, and learning what the balance is for you. What works for me may not work for you. And so what works for me is I tend to listen to my hunger and fullness. And every so often, what I will do is I will plan ahead for a few days and look at, am I getting enough protein in my meals? Am I getting enough fruits and vegetables? Am I getting enough water? Those are the 3 things I struggle with most. So those are my 3 things I struggle with. And so we can talk about that another time, of how we can plan ahead for how much to eat. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you guys find that helpful. I know there's a lot of questions that go around how much you should be eating in a day. So feel free to comment below with any questions that you have. Don't forget that you can like, comment, and subscribe. And please share this with a friend, a family member, a gym owner, a trainer, anyone who you think will find this helpful. And that'll keep this channel going and hopefully get you more information about nutrition to help you live your most satisfied and sassy life. So thank you guys, and I'll talk to you next time. Recording YouTube videos is so weird. Like, I'm just talking to a screen. Anybody out there? Anybody? Okay. We are not stable human beings, right? I guess stable was the wrong word. Mentally stable, maybe we are, but are we? It's 2020 after all. However, is this thing on? So I do not trust activity trackers